Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Lord the Mar, Theron stood in the ruins of Silvermoon City, the echoes of the past haunting him with every step. The once magnificent city, bathed in the golden light of the sunwell, now lay in ruins, a shadow of its former self. The betrayal had come swift and brutal, ripping through their defenses, leaving the city in chaos. He stared at the shattered walls, the rubble that was once home to his people, and his heart sank. The blood elves had suffered many losses over the years, but this felt like the final blow. Beside him, Lady Leaderin, the stalwart paladin of the Blood Knights, stood vigilant. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination, mirrored his own feeling. "This should never have happened," she said, her voice low but firm. "No, it shouldn't have," Lord the Mar replied. "But it did. Sarthral betrayed us, and now we must set it right." Sarthral, the name tasted like ash in Lord Famar's mouth. A noble once respected within Silvermoon walls, Sarthral had been one of their own, a powerful mage who in his lust for power had turned to the void. His rebellion had torn the city apart, leading a faction of blood elves who believed the void could offer them a future far greater than the arcane magic that had sustained them for millennia. But the void was a corrupting force, and Sarthral, twisted by its influence, had taken his followers into the heart of that dark power. They were no longer blood elves in the truest sense. They were something else, something dangerous. Lord the Mar clenched his fists as the rage swelled in his chest. His people were suffering, and it was his duty to protect them. He had no choice but to hunt down the traitor and end this madness. Silvermoon couldn't afford another civil war. "We'll gather our forces," Lord the Mar said, turning to Liedrin. "I want our best warriors, those who can resist the influence of the void. We can't risk any more corruption." Liedrin nodded. "I will summon the Blood Knights. We'll be ready to leave by dawn." As she departed to make the preparations, Lord the Mar stood alone for a moment, longer surveying the ruins of his city. It pained him to see Silvermoon like this, but it also fueled his resolve. He had led his people through many dark times, and he would do so again. But this time, it felt personal. Sarthral's set of betrayal had cut deeper than any external enemy ever could. He took a deep breath and turned toward the palace. There was no time for hesitation. The sun had barely risen when Lord the Mar and Liedrin led a small force out of Silvermoon and into the wilderness. The rebels had fled to the void-touched lands to the north, where reality itself had begun to warp under the influence of the void. It was dangerous territory, but Lord the Mar had no choice. They had to stop Sarthral before his power grew any stronger. As they traveled, the land around them began to change. The once lush and vibrant forests of Quel'Thalas became twisted and dark, the trees gnarled and blackened as if poisoned by some unseen force. The air grew thick, with a palpable sense of dread, and strange whispers echoed on the wind. Lord the Mar could feel the void's influence pressing down on him, but he pushed it aside. His mind was strong, his purpose clear. Liedrin, riding beside him, was silent, her gaze fixed ahead. She, too, felt the weight of the void, but like Lord the Mar, her resolve was unshakable. She had faced many battles, but this was different. The enemy they pursued wasn't just a physical threat. It was a corruption of the soul, and if they failed, that corruption would spread. They reached a clearing where the trees parted, revealing a strange glowing fissure in the ground. The air around it shimmered with dark energy, and Lord the Mar could feel the void sun pull stronger than ever. It was here that Sarthral and his followers had entered the void realm. "This is it," Liedrin said, her voice tight. Lord the Mar nodded. "Be ready. Once we cross into the void, there's no turning back." The blood elves behind them, an elite force handpicked for their strength and loyalty, were tense but prepared. They knew the risks, but they trusted Lord the Mar and Liedrin with their lives. They had no choice but to follow their leaders into the unknown. With a final glance at his companions, Lord the Mar stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the void rift. The world around him shifted, and for a moment he felt as though he were falling. His senses were overwhelmed by darkness, by the void's cold, suffocating presence, but then just as suddenly it was over. He found himself standing in a strange, shadowy landscape. The sky above was dark, swirling with purple and black clouds. The ground beneath his feet felt unstable, like it could give way at any moment, and all around him, the air was thick with void magic. The others appeared behind him, and Lord the Moor could see the unease in their eyes. This place was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was as though they were standing in a world that wasn't quite real. "This is where Sarthral has been hiding," Lord the Moor said, his voice steady. "He's grown stronger here, but we won't let that stop us. We will find him and end it." Liadrin nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. "Let's move." They pressed forward, navigating the treacherous, void landscape. The ground shifted beneath their feet, and strange, twisted creatures emerged from the shadows, attacking with feral intensity. These void-tainted beasts were unlike anything Lord Thimar had ever seen, warped, unnatural things that moved with an eerie grace. Lord Thimar and Liadrin fought side by side, cutting through the creatures with precision and skill. Their elite force held strong, but the further they went, the more dangerous the void became. The air was thick with corruption, and even the strongest of the blood elves could feel its pull tugging at their minds, whispering dark thought. "We need to keep moving," Lord Thimar said after another skirmish, his breath coming in short bursts. "If we stay here too long, the void will start to affect us." Liadrin wiped the sweat from her brow, her eyes hard. "Agreed. Sarthral is close. I can feel it." They continued through the void realm, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the corruption. The landscape around them shifted and changed, as if the void itself were alive, responding to their presence. Strange structures loomed in the distance, twisted spires of dark energy that pulsed with a sickly glow. And then finally they saw him. Sarthral stood at the top of a ridge, his form silhouetted against the swirling void sky. He had changed since Lore Thimar had last seen him. His once noble features were twisted, his skin darkened by void energy, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He looked less like the elf he had once been, and more like a creature of the void itself. "Sarthral Lore," Thimar shouted, his voice ringing out across the void. "This ends now." Sarthral turned slowly, his gaze locking onto Lore Thimar. A slow smile spread across his face, a smile that chilled Lore Thimar to his core. "Lord Thimar," Sarthral said, his voice low and resonant. "I've been expecting you." Lord Thimar drew his sword, the blade gleaming in the dim light. "You betrayed your people, Sarthral. You've turned your back on everything the Blood Elves stand for." Sarthral chuckled softly, his eyes gleaming. "No, Lord Thimar. I've embraced the future. The void is the key to our survival, our evolution. The arcane is weak, outdated. With the void, we can become something greater than we ever imagined." Greater, Liadrin spat, stepping forward. "You've become a monster." Sarthral's smile widened. "A monster? No, Lady Liadrin. I am what the Blood Elves should aspire to be. Strong, unbreakable, eternal." Lord Thimar shook his head. "You've lost yourself, Sarthral. The void has corrupted you." Sarthral's expression darkened. "I haven't lost anything, Lord Thimar. I've gained power beyond your comprehension, and soon you will see that the void is the only way forward." With a flick of his wrist, Sarthral summoned a wave of void energy, sending it crashing toward Lord Thimar and his forces. The battle began in an instant, the air crackling with magic as both sides clashed. Lord Thimar and Liadrin fought together, their movements fluid and synchronized, but Sarthral's power was immense. The void swirled around him, bending to his will, and for a moment, Lord Thimar wondered if they had made a mistake coming here. But there was no turning back now. Lord Thimar could feel the sheer force of Sarthral's power rippling through the void-touched air, the energy thick and oppressive. His sword clashed with the void-twisted creatures that swarmed around them, each strike meeting resistance as if the air itself conspired to slow their movement. Yet Lord Thimar pressed forward, each step driven by the need to stop Sarthral and end this madness before it consumed them all. Liadrin, unwavering at his side, was a beacon of light amidst the darkness, her holy magic cutting through the void creatures like a blade through shadow. Her focus never wavered, her strikes precise and lethal, yet Lord Thimar could see the toll this battle was taking on her. The void was relentless, its whispers insidious, tugging at their minds, trying to unravel their very will. Sarthral, standing atop the ridge, watched them with a cold, detached gaze. His smile was gone, replaced by something darker, more dangerous. His void magic surged again, this time in a concentrated burst aimed directly at Lord Thimar. The force of it sent him reeling back, barely able to block the onslaught with his blade. He could feel the cold grip of the void trying to seep into his mind, into his soul, and for a brief moment, doubt flickered in his heart. Was Sarthral right? Was the void truly the future of the Blood Elf? He couldn't allow himself to believe that. With a roar, Lord Thamar surged forward, breaking free of the void's hold and charging towards Sarthral. The ground beneath him trembled as the void energy pulsed through the landscape, but he kept moving, kept fighting. Every fiber of his being was focused on one thing, stopping Sarthral before it was too late. Liadrin was right behind him, her sword gleaming with holy light as she cut down the last of the void-touched creatures standing between them and the traitor. Together, they climbed the ridge, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. Sarthral was waiting for them at the top, his form now fully twisted by the void cell power. His eyes glowed with a sickly purple light, and void tendrils writhed around him like living shadows. "You read too late," Sarthral said, his voice echoing unnaturally as though the void itself spoke through him. "The void has already won." Lord Thamar raised his sword, his grip tightening around the hilt. "Not yet." Sarthral sneered. "You still cling to your outdated beliefs, Lord Thamar. You refuse to see the truth. The arcane is weak. The void is limitless." "You were wrong," Lord Thamar said. Stepping forward, "The void destroys everything it touches." "I want to let that happen to Silverman. I want to let that happen to my people." Sarthral's sneer twisted into a grimace. "Your people, they are my people now. They will follow me into the void, and you—" Lord Thamar didn't wait for him to finish. With a fierce battle cry, he lunged at Sarthral, his sword flashing in the dim void light. Sarthral met him head-on, void magic crackling around his form as their weapons clashed. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, the force of it nearly knocking Lord Thamar off his feet. But he held firm, pushing back against the overwhelming power that surged from Sarthral and its blade. The battle between them was fierce, each strike met with an equal counter. Lord Thamar's arcane, infused blade cut through the void energy that surrounded Sarthral, but the traitor was relentless, his magic warping the air around them, twisting reality itself. Shadows seemed to come alive, clawing at Lord Thamar, trying to drag him down into the depths of the void. But he fought back, his will stronger than the darkness that sought to consume him. Liadrin, seeing Lord Thamar locked in combat with Sarthral, unleashed a powerful blast of holy magic, aiming it directly at Sarthral, exposed flame. The burst of light pierced through the void energy, searing the traitor's side and eliciting a howl of pain. Sarthral staggered, his concentration faltering for a split second. It was all the opening Noranther needed. With a swift, decisive strike, Lord Thamar drove his sword through Sarthral's defenses, the blade sinking deep into the traitor's chest. Sarthral's eyes widened in shock, the void energy around him flickering and fading. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a final gasp, Sarthral collapsed to the ground, the void tendrils around him dissipating into nothingness. Lord Thamar stood over the fallen traitor, breathing heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle was over. Sarthral was defeated, but as he looked down at the twisted form of the once noble blood elf, a deep sense of sorrow washed over him. This wasn't a victory to be celebrated. It was a tragedy, a loss for their people, for Silvermoon. Liadrin approached her, expression grim but resolute itself. Lord Thamar nodded, his voice hoarse. "Yes, but the damage has been done. The void's influence it spread." Liadrin sheathed her sword, her gaze hardening. "We can still stop it. We have to cleanse Silvermoon of this corruption before it takes root." Lord Thamar looked up at the swirling void sky, the dark clouds roiling above them. "You're right. We need to return there. Still much to be done." They turned away from Sarthral's body, the weight of their victory heavy on their shoulders. The void rift still pulsed with dark energy, but Lord Thamar knew they had to leave it behind. The longer they stayed in this place, the more dangerous it became. They had to return to Silvermoon to rebuild, to heal. As they made their way back through the void-touched landscape, the creatures that had once swarmed them now retreated, their connection to Sarthral severed. The void's hold on the land was weakening, but its whispers still lingered at the edge of their consciousness, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond sight. The journey back to Silvermoon was quieter than the one that had brought them to the void realm. The warriors who had accompanied them walked in silence, their expressions solemn. They had won the battle, but the cost had been high. When they finally crossed the threshold back into Silvermoon, the city was still in ruins, but there was a sense of hope in the air. The traitor was defeated, the Void's immediate threat had been quelled, but Lord Thamar knew that this was only the beginning of their struggle. The damage that had been done to their people would take time to heal. He stood once more at the edge of the city, overlooking the broken walls, the shattered building. His people would need him now more than ever. The burden of leadership weighed heavily on him, but he would carry it. He had to. Liadrin stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Alfie faced worse," she said quietly. "We'll rebuild. We always do." Lord Thamar nodded, though the weariness in his bones told him that the path ahead would be long and difficult. "Yes, we will." But even as he spoke the words, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that the Void's influence wasn't truly gone. It lingered, like a shadow, at the edges of his mind, a reminder that the darkness could never be fully banished. It was always there waiting. And as long as it remained, Lord Thamar knew he could never rest.